There's a Chevrolet with muscle car stripes, a fastback rear end, an SS badge on the side, and an inline-six engine that almost no American driver has ever sat behind. Chevrolet sold it for more than 2 decades. It was the fastest car produced in its country. It was discontinued 20 years after the United States buried the muscle car era. And it isn't a Nova, it isn't a Chevelle, it isn't a Camaro. It's a car called the Opala, built in Brazil between 1968 and 1992 by General Motors do Brasil. And its story explains something strange about the automotive industry. It explains how the same General Motors built, in 2 different hemispheres, 2 muscle cars with the same mechanical heart and 2 opposite fates. To understand why, you have to go back to a decision made in São Caetano do Sul in 1966. That year, General Motors had been operating in Brazil for 4 decades. It had arrived in 1925, but across all those decades, the São Caetano plant had assembled only trucks, pickups, and utility vehicles, never a passenger car. The Brazilian subsidiary had a problem in 1966, similar to the one Volkswagen do Brasil would face 10 years later with the Gol. The national market was demanding a mid-size sedan capable of competing with what Ford and the newly arrived Fiat would soon offer. American headquarters didn't have a ready model. The American Chevrolets of the moment, the Impala, the Caprice, the Bel Air, were too big, too expensive, and too thirsty for Brazilian economic reality. The solution came from GM's German subsidiary. Opel in Rüsselsheim had just launched the Record C, a mid-size sedan, contemporary design, reasonable dimensions for the European buyer. Brazilian engineering took the Opel body and performed an operation on it that no other GM subsidiary would have attempted with the same boldness. The body came from Germany, but the engine came from the United States. GM Brazil's engineering team concluded that the original European engine was too small for the reality of Brazilian highways and the power expectations of the country's upper-middle-class consumer. The solution was to import directly from the American industrial base 2 different engines, a 153 cubic inch 4-cylinder, derived from the Chevy 2 Nova, and an inline-six starting at 230 cubic inches and later evolving to 250, which was the standard engine across much of the American Chevrolet lineup, including the Impala. That technical detail is decisive. The 250 inline-six powered millions of American Chevrolets. It was one of the most widespread engine blocks in GM history. And that engine, the same one, exactly the same with no structural change, would become the soul of the Brazilian muscle car. The name came afterward. On November 23, 1968, during the 6th São Paulo Auto Show, GM unveiled the car on a rotating stage. The name chosen from thousands of suggestions was Opala, a precious stone, colorless when extracted from the ground, taking on multiple tones when exposed to light. GM officially denies that there was any intent to phonetically suggest the American Impala, but the coincidence is hard to ignore. Opel body, Impala engine, a name that sounds like a hybrid of the 2 words. Coincidence or not, the christening sealed the car's identity. The Opala was, from origin, transatlantic. Production began in 1969. 4-door sedan, 2 engine options, 2 trim levels. It sold well from the first year. But what would make the car iconic came in 1971, when GM Brazil launched the SS version, a 2-door fastback coupe, side stripes, dashboard with a tachometer, recessed headlights, aggressive styling drawn directly from the American Chevy Nova SS of the era. The engine was the 250 inline-six, tuned to deliver between 140 and 171 horsepower, depending on the year and configuration. 4-speed manual transmission, later 5. Rear-wheel drive, independent front suspension with coil springs, solid rear axle. The recipe was practically identical to the American Nova SS. Same engine platform, same mechanical philosophy, same Detroit muscle car aesthetic, just on another continent. And here enters the parallel that defines the documentary. Between 1968 and 1974, American Chevrolet was simultaneously producing 2 mid-size muscle cars with the 250 inline-six as the entry-level engine option. In the United States, that engine was the starting point. Anyone who wanted real performance bought the V8, 350 or 396 cubic inches. In Brazil, the 250 was the top of the lineup. It was the maximum power option industrially produced in the country. The popular Brazilian car of the moment, the Beetle, had 46 horsepower. The Opala SS had 140. To the Brazilian consumer, it was a car from another planet. To the American consumer, it was an entry-level engine. And then came 1973, the OPEC embargo. Oil prices quadrupled. American drivers discovered in a matter of months that the 8-cylinder V8 consumed more fuel than the household budget could absorb. In parallel, the federal government of the United States tightened environmental regulations. The Environmental Protection Agency, created 3 years earlier, required catalytic converters on all new vehicles starting in 1975, along with mandatory unleaded gasoline. Insurance companies began rating muscle cars as extreme-risk vehicles, with premiums that became prohibitive for younger drivers. The combination was fatal. The horsepower ratings of American V8s collapsed year over year. The 454 engine that made 450 horsepower in 1970 was producing 270 horsepower by 1973. The Chevy Nova SS, stripped of the high-power V8 versions that had given it its reason to exist, was effectively discontinued by 1974. The Chevelle SS lost its identity. By 1975, the classic American muscle car, as a commercial category, had been smothered by a combination of oil, regulation, and actuarial math. In Brazil, none of that happened. The national market had been closed to imports since the 1950s, protected by tariff barriers that would last until 1990. There were no Brazilian federal emission standards equivalent to the American ones. PROCONV, the National Emissions Control Program, would only be instituted in 1986 and in gradual phases. There was no insurance regime that priced muscle cars prohibitively. Gasoline prices were a burden, but Brazil solved that problem through a different path. The Pro-Álcool program, launched in 1975, which opened the market to ethanol-burning engines, including ethanol versions of the Opala itself starting in 1979. The Opala SS kept going. In 1975, it received a facelift with a new grille and new taillights. In 1978, it gained a Caravan SS version, a sport wagon, a concept that essentially didn't exist in the American muscle car world. SS production ran until 1980. The Opala sedan, in other configurations, continued in production until 1992. The same inline-six the EPA had made economically unviable in the United States ran in São Paulo for another 15 years. Approximately 1 million Opalas were produced across those 2.5 decades. The car became cultural heritage before the concept of automotive heritage existed. It served as a taxi for entire decades. It served as a patrol car for the federal police and state departments. It served as the official government car during the military regime, transporting agents of the National Information Service through the 1970s. It served as corporate fleet. It served as the family car for the middle class. It served as a race car, winning 15 Brazilian stock car championships across its history. It was officially replaced in 1992 by the Chevrolet Omega, which was, ironically, another Opel spin-off adapted for Brazil. The same transatlantic formula that had worked in 1968 being recycled 24 years later. Today, the Opala has become a cult object among Brazilian tuners who discovered something Americans never seriously attempted: that the 250 inline-six can handle aggressive turbocharging and produce power figures that border on the absurd. An Opala SS built by Fueltech, a Brazilian engine management company, has been documented generating 850 horsepower from the original 6-cylinder block, and more radical builds exceed 2,000 horsepower. It's a level of preparation that American enthusiasts of the same engine never explored with the same intensity. Partly because in the United States, anyone wanting power always had a V8 available. Partly because the 250 block was retired from American production back in the 1980s. In Brazil, it became cultural tradition, a chapter of American GM history that survived only because it was exported across the Atlantic, manufactured in a closed country and adopted by an automotive culture that had no alternative. The editorial question that remains isn't whether the Opala was better or worse than the American Nova SS. It was worse on nearly every metric except local price and availability. The real question is a different one. What gets preserved when a closed market keeps alive, for decades, a product that global competition would have killed in a few years? The Brazilian answer, in the case of the Opala, was unexpected. What remained wasn't an industrial fossil. It was an entire culture of mechanics, tuners, drivers, and owners who adopted the car as national identity. The Opala didn't survive because it was good. It survived because Brazil in the 1970s and 1980s had no other option. And that lack of option, paradoxically, became heritage.